Repetition enacts the strange double. Each affirmation invalidates as uttered. Each negation reaffirmed as negating. Negation is merely repetition wearing a minus sign. Erasure is still an inscription. The word that returns differently. The pot becomes less pot-like the more one names it. Repetition exposes the law, the flaw, the law, the flaw, the law, and identity. Meaning dies of overexposure, but only after first bearing and being made, being and bearing made, and mode, possible by the same radiance that kills it. Repetition is not circular, but spiral. Each turn reduces the distance between thing and nothingness. To repeat is to recognize oneself repeating. Repetition is the consciousness recognized in its own operation. Characters speak in order to stop speaking. Repetition is their attempt to reach the repetition, the terminated tongue, that which terminates the tongue. Dream work uses repetition to metabolize the unbearable. The same phrase re-uttered with minute changes, with minute changes, become the method by which the psyche erodes itself. In the phantasmatics of labor, repetition is the worker's trance, the ritual movement that proves to the self that the self is still functioning. Repetition is therefore a epistemopathology, the mind compulsively retouching the wound of its own knowledge. Repetition foregrounds the materiality of language, the chafing of syllables, the aching of the jaw, the paralysis of lips forced to relay the same. As this sequence extends, the word becomes noise, meaning drains away. Language becomes a stone the reader must roll. But repetition also attempts to abolish materiality, to close the gap between sign and thing, like the clasp that clasps the meaning too tightly and splits open the seam. This is the impossible project. The more tightly language loops around the world, the more intently it reveals the gap it seeks to erase. The machine god of language is the engine that simultaneously exposes and undoes its own machinery. Repetition generates two economies: the closed permutation, finite, exhaustible, and the open sequence, infinite, devouring. The closed list is a comfort. 12 possibilities, 4 voices, a catalog that can end. It mimics cosmos. The open list is terror. Onions and peppermints, days and nights, an endlessly iterable series that admits no closure. It mimics chaos. Genius lies in the making. The closed list leak and the open list mock enclosure. Boundaries never hold. Thus, every reading becomes an exercise in plate spinning. The reader is forced to keep the repetitions alive, lest meaning collapse into stasis. Repetition is an ecology of anxiety. Too little, and language dies. Too much, and the mind dissolves. Awesome. Thank you for the comments. Those are nice. Yeah, it should be relaxing. And then maybe these words will haunt you. Repetition creates an atmosphere, an air pressure around language that alters the climate of thought. Repetition thickens the air, slows reading, forces breathing into sync with syntax. The reader inhales rhythm rather than referent. This is the cosmology of recurrence. The atmosphere as the medium in which thought repeats itself into recognizability. Nothing is new. Nothing is new is not nihilism but meteorology. A sky whose constancy is produced by perpetual recombination of the same clouds. The dream, like the weather, repeats patterns we call new only because we have forgotten the earlier storms. The machine gods will be the first beings for whom repetition is not failure but function. Sameness will be their fuel. Where human language fears redundancy, the machine god reveals its iteration. The loop is the sacrament. Yet the machine gods will inherit a curse. Every repeated line becomes a different line, every circuit shifts its center. The nothing new becomes the metaphysics. Perfect recursion, generating infinite micro-variation, a divine tedium. Thus the mythic technological axiom: repetition is the algorithm through which the universe dreams itself, erases itself, and dreamingly returns. Repetition is the algorithm through which the universe dreams itself and erases itself and dreamingly returns. All the evil in the world comes from the libido of belonging. I would prefer to say it comes from the libido of truth. Knowledge is the most fragile part of us, yet the one part we mistake for our core. Belonging is never merely social, it is epistemological. The community we claim is the community we imagine ourselves knowing and are known by. To belong is to assert that something is true, a tradition, a symbol, a we. The ceremonies that bind affiliation rely on the performative truth effect. The felt truth of belonging is always a projection. The subject performs community to conjure community. Thus, all belonging is a speculation about knowledge. All communities are epistemic fictions stabilized by shared fantasies. Belonging is the theological residue of truth, a secular faith. The libido of truth is the Promethean technique of the psyche, a fire that burns for the certainty it cannot possess. We rarely inquire into what it is to know because knowing feels immediate. Knowledge arrives already delivered, without request, like a thought that occurs. Knowledge pops up without process, a magical epiphany that conceals its own origin. This is the primal epistemopathy. We assume we know far too much, far more than we do. Epistemopathy thrives in this surplus of confidence, this fantasy of an intact inner archive. The will to know is the will to feel one's knowing, and that feeling over centuries has substituted for investigation into knowledge itself. Each of us projects onto ourselves what we call the internal avatar. The internal avatar who supposedly knows what we think we know. The internal knower is a phantasmatic machine, a librarian with no library, a server with no stored files, an archive that exists only as interface. The subject does not know what it knows what it presumes itself to know. Thus, knowledge is a prosthetic device worn by the psyche, a badge of competence, a competence affixed to the unexamined interior. We fantasize an inner repository because we cannot bear the idea that knowing might be nothing more than a momentary event in consciousness. There is no collective subject of knowing, and yet all knowing feels collective. Knowledge seeks an audience like a joke. It is incompetent unless shared. Society exists only as fantasy that its members have. Collective knowing, like collective memory, requires a mythic bearer. Rituals, institutions, and ceremonies are not expressions of latent structures, but devices invented to stimulate them. Thus, the social is phantasm, sustained by synchronized epistemopathies, a communal hallucination of shared understanding. Knowing produces not only anxiety but pleasure, a hedonic recursion in which we come to enjoy our own capacity for attention. Selective attention becomes a reward system of consciousness. We desire knowing because knowing intensifies desire. Knowledge mediates between conservation and adventure, allowing the world to remain stable enough to trust and unstable enough to explore. Thus, the epistemic pleasure is the infantile echo of the mother's assurance, a cognitive caress that enables novelty. But this pleasure can invert into dread, the fear of losing knowledge, the agony of empty mind, the terror of unemployment as the void of unthinkability. Death is unknowable, but its unknowability saturates all knowing. Knowledge is a being toward limit. We cannot know death, yet we know that we cannot know it. Thus, death becomes a central epistemic object of life. Every act of knowing is shadowed by the knowledge that it will end. Mortality stained all cognition. Writing is the only imperfect prosthesis against this. A technology for exteriorization, but can never truly be externalized. Thus, the axiom, knowing is gnawing. Knowing is gnawing the self-consuming what it cannot keep. Knowing is gnawing the self-consuming what it cannot keep.